Hello and welcome to Prairie Pulse. Coming up a little bit later in the show, we'll profile Minnesota artist Boyd Sharp. But first, joining me now is Madeline Kamrud. Madeline, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here, John.
As we get started, tell the folks a little bit about yourself, your background, where you're originally from.
I am originally from North Dakota, from near Grand Forks, born and raised on a farm southwest of Grand Forks. Thompson was the rural address. Educated in Grand Forks, except for grade school in the country, of course. My husband and I, after he graduated from law school, moved out west, which was eastern Montana. But that wasn't too appealing, so shortly we came back to central North Dakota, then eventually back to Grand Forks in the 60s, I would say, early 60s, and there I have been ever since, and unfortunately the last few years without him. But he was a native of Buxton, and I was from Thompson, and you know where those towns are, don't you?
I do.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we're here today to talk about your book.
Yes.
And of course, it's oddly beautiful poems that you have written. So tell us how you became a poet.
Well, I wouldn't say it was accidental, but I would say that the need for self-expression has probably always been in me. They say that as a child I drew a lot, and in grade school my friends say, oh, you were drawing all the time. Then I became interested in music. By the time I was in high school, I was a singer, you know, in operettas and things like that at Central High School in Grand Forks. And then after I married, I switched to visual art and became a painter. I had never really tried paints as a kid, just drawing, you know, but did a lot of painting in a very realistic way, copying other pictures. You know how you start out. But that became old after a while, and I do crave to express myself uniquely, I think. And so I started going back to classes at UND in painting, and then I did a television show for a while. I think I told you that, for about 7.5 years. And when I left that, it was my need to go back to school and continue learning something. I wasn't sure what, but I took visual arts courses, of course, and then decided to double major in English. Because I had taken about 2 writing classes at that time, and by then I was 39. And just, you know, classes like from university professors that they teach at night for community and that. And I got pretty interested in it, but I think the timing was absolutely perfect for me to become a poet, because when I went back to school in '85, a wonderful man by the name of Jay Meek came to the UND campus at precisely the same time, had just been awarded a Guggenheim Fellowship for his poetry. He was excellent. He was accepting of me, convinced me I really had what it took. So I studied 3 years as an undergraduate student. He says, Madeline, you can go on and get a master's in creative writing. They did have a master's program in creative writing. I think they still do. It's not an MFA, but master's in creative writing. And so I stuck with it and taught those 2 years, which was a real experience. GTA, you probably did it. I don't know, a lot of us do, but it's a good experience to know if you want to be a teacher or not, which I found out I didn't. So, but that was, by the time I finished that program with the master's in English, I still wasn't sure I was a poet. He thought I was. But about 2 years later, New Rivers Press published my first book, called This House is Filled with Cracks. And that was in 1994. Meanwhile, I had left the English department and taken a job at the North Dakota Museum of Art, because I still had this very strong attraction to visual art and had actually studied it too in my years back in school. So while I was working at the museum, poetry kind of went by the wayside. I wouldn't say I quit writing, but you know, there's obviously a lot to do at the museum, so you don't devote your days. It takes a certain mindset and attitude, and I'm rambling too much here, but I think one poet said, I have to be in that melancholy mood. For me, it helps to go for a leisurely walk. It helps to look at nature. You have to slow down to be a poet, and I think working at the museum wasn't a very slow time for me. But after I left there and my husband retired is when I was going to really get seriously into writing. And wouldn't you know, he became ill. But I had been writing, I would say, constantly from age 39 and on. It's just that it goes by streaks in terms of how, you know, daily it is and how serious it is, probably.
Yeah. Well, tell us about your poetry. You know, what do you write about?
I write about what goes on around me, the people I meet, the relationships in my family, about nature, you know, interspersed, and a lot of recollections. If I'm also, I also lately am inserting news stories or things that I hear that have impact on me as I might be driving down the road, listening to NPR. I learn a lot from NPR, I'll be honest. They have great facts. But I would say also what was kind of instrumental in this whole thing about becoming a writer was when I was about 38 or 39, I was doing a lot of work with a therapist. I started writing my dreams. And that person told me, you could be a poet. You know, scary word, it sounds. But I noticed that now I have recorded my dreams really ever since, and that often they get into my poems. And you may not have noticed which ones were dream-driven or not. I mean, sometimes they can become the whole poem. And people don't know it because dreams are actually a gift of metaphor. They are totally metaphoric, and they are just fascinating to me. I was going to
So I see you looking. Are you going to read us one that
I'm
might
looking
be
for
a
one
dream
that
poem?
is called The Way He Left, and this is jumping ahead in the book because this is actually after my husband has passed. I worked on the poems. They were sketched a lot while he was ill in spare time, and when things happened that were impactful, I sketched them out, or sometimes maybe I wrote them nearly to finish, but you know, poems need a lot of revising, always. So, but then 2 years after Ted had passed away, I went back to all of them and revised, but I had other new dreams, and they get into this sort of tail end of the book here.
So you want to read us?
And this one is the dream one.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good.
And okay, I got to tell you this too. In the initial stages, this book was called You Leaving Me, because that is how I felt during the whole illness. You have the nerve to leave me. You are going to go and leave me after 50 years. And there was a little bit of anger there and disappointment that these were our last years together and they should be better than this, you know? So a lot of the poems had this aspect of leaving or not in them, like the way you leave, how you leave. This one is called What You Left Me. So it's the dream that I was left with. Okay, what you left me. Begin with the dream, the life that is only a film, black and white, silent. Then the awkward contraption I push down the aisle, a larger-than-life stroller, no baby in it. Hard to see in semi-darkness, I squeeze between front rows and discover the movie features you, the hero, me, unsettled, wanting more. That's the picture. I want to get up and scrawl my name across the screen as if to say, this is how it was. This was us. No one in the theater but me, lovers in the last row, gone. I turn and look back, wanting your arm around my shoulder. I can't stop gripping the handle of this crazy quasi-stroller wedged in sideways, too close. Images flicker across the screen, a gray blur. The reel unwinds like a clock, the end repeating again and again, as if the awful truth cannot be said enough. That's for Matt O'Lean because it's a movie.
You know, what is the value of life experiences in writing poems?
For me, especially in the period 2 years after Ted had passed, I grieved harder than I had really at the time of his death. So it was a real facility for active grieving. It was very, very helpful that way, because I had steeled myself to not being a moped. That's not the right word, not moping around the house and being sad. We went out and did things. I took Ted with me as much as I could. So I tried to put up this front of like, we're gonna be okay. And even as Ted passed, I didn't let down. I didn't just break down. I was probably numb for 1.5 years or 2. And then writing these and going back to these, and they will always bring a great deal of emotion up in me every time I read them. And I don't consider that sad or bad or anything like that. I consider it healthy. We have to grieve our losses, and we never get over our losses. We just learn to live with them and live fully in spite of them.
Mm-hmm. So then, how do we learn from another's life experiences?
Well, okay, let me put it this way. If I had read this book when Ted became ill with this dementia, which was called Dementia with Lewy Bodies, which is not totally Alzheimer's, it's Alzheimer's with elements of Parkinson's as well. Mm-hmm. And it's a lot more common than you think. We hear a lot about Alzheimer's, but that is 60 to 80% of the dementias, but this Lewy Bodies thing is pretty much out there too. It's right up there next to Alzheimer's. What was I on here? I forgot.
About life experiences and what we learn from others' life experiences.
Oh, yeah. What I was going to say is, if I had read this book before Ted became ill, I did already say that, didn't I? I would have probably done things differently. Mm-hmm. I made mistakes, and I know what they are now. I didn't at the time I was doing them because I wasn't aware enough. So hopefully this book can help make people aware so they know what to look for. Think twice before you call the long-term care residents and say, I want to bring my husband in. I mean, I had checked them out, gone to both of them. He had visited there for daycare, but still, think a long time before you do that.
Okay.
That's one thing.
Okay, well, does poetry still have meaning in today's world?
Well, I certainly think so. But do you? I mean, you should ask yourself. I think, of course, I believe it has a big place in my world, and I think all poets think that way, because we mirror the world around us, and we are kind of making history. I tell people that I hope this will someday be a history book. They'll say, what is this thing that this man had, that he did these crazy things? Because maybe Alzheimer's and dementias will be cured. Maybe. Okay. They're working on it. So it's very important that we write what is around us, what the population is involved in as we live. Artists always like to mirror their lives, whether it's through the visual arts or through literature. It's all we got. While we were here doing our time on Earth, maybe we want to leave a mark, not for self-aggrandizement, but because we think other people can benefit from it.
Yeah. Okay. But, you know, is poetry different than the days of Tennyson or Byron than it is today?
I think poetry has always been and should always be music. Don't think we've gotten rid of rhyme. We've gotten rid of it at the end of the line, but rhythms and rhyme are very much in my poems, I hope, because people call them lyrical. If they're called lyrical, they are kind of working music a little bit. But mine are narrative pretty much, which means storytelling. But yes, I mean, language has changed. Think of all the words you're using now that Tennyson wouldn't have known, or Shakespeare. So language is constantly changing, and of course poetry is changing along with it, because we are users of language. It's the only medium we have.
Okay. What do you think about school programs like Poetry Out Loud? Prairie Public has partnered with the North Dakota Council on the Arts to produce a Poetry Out Loud, encouraging young people to write.
Yeah, I have not, ever heard it. I mean, I've seen it on Facebook, and on the computer a lot, and I get the newsletter from Jan
So
Webb.
what about school programs promoting this type of thing and
wonderful.
working with it? How important is it?
I think it's extremely important, as I think the visual arts are important. I think self-expression for a lot of kids is what'll keep them off the streets and from doing drugs. But they're afraid to do it because it's not hockey, and it's not football, and you're not cool. I think music they accept more easily as a means of self-expression, you know, because music has always been pretty entrenched in the, and that's excellent. I mean, I love music, as I told you, my first love. But I don't know how many kids, you know, would agree with me that it's important for them to write poems or learn poems. You know, in grade school in the country, we memorized poems, the great poems. Mm-hmm. Had a book that I just wore out. So I guess I loved them even then. Mm-hmm. And that was a good practice.
Well, can you talk about the reception you've had to your poems?
It's been really outrageously good. Maybe especially from women. Yeah, it's. I've been in Seattle and Minneapolis reading poems, but I mean, I've got a wonderful publisher, New Rivers Press, over there in Moorhead, so they have arranged a lot of these things for me, and some local readings as well. And I'm going to be doing a bed and breakfast tour with Suzanne Kelly of New Rivers Press sometime this month, and that'll be really interesting, going out to Cooperstown and places like that, and I'll be have been in Jamestown. I love doing that, and I want to get the word out, but people receive it really well because you know why? Because these dementias are so prevalent. Mm. I mean, I'm noticing that most of the people I sell the book to afterwards when we talk are saying, "Oh, it's my grandmother or my mother or my husband's mother who has this," and of course every case is going to be so different from the other, but yet there are similarities, and hopefully they get, I don't know if they get help or what from this, but whatever, get something.
Well, Madeline, we're running out of time. We've got a couple of minutes. Could you read a couple more poems for us?
Oh, okay. You've just got a couple minutes. Well, I like to read The Blizzard because, see, now I'm leaving out all the poems that led up to Ted's passing, but that's okay. You have to buy the book to read those.
There you go.
Blizzards are so beautiful in North Dakota, aren't they? You're from the South. You probably don't know that. But this was a very healing poem for me. It's called Blizzard. I have found you in strange places, your handkerchief in the freezer, clean and white behind ice cream, tucked near boxes of broccoli, frozen peas. Later, in your wallet, leather worn to fit your pocket, slid under a plate in the buffet. I called out Ted, worried at first you'd misplaced it, tried hard to find it, then laughed, opening the fold, finding a 20 you'd saved for me. You come back the way you left, a little at a time, like crumbs tossed along a path I follow. In small acts of survival, we all make our way. You stashed what you could for reasons I can't explain. This morning in heavy snowfall, 2 small birds pecking suet in a storm that won't let up. Flakes thicken on the glass. I'm here with a pen, trying hard to set down what I know of our lives, as if someday someone might find us. It's another reason we write poems, so we're remembered.
Well, Madeline, we are going to be out of time, but you mentioned it. If people want information about your book or want to buy your book, where can they go?
I appreciate the local bookstores, so I would say Zanbro is here, Ferguson's in Grand Forks, but of course there's Barnes & Noble, and of course there's the UND bookstore, which is kind of local, and of course there's Amazon. I say that last.
Okay. Madeline, thanks so much for joining us today, and best of luck.
Thank you, John. It's been a pleasure. Okay. Thank you.
Stay tuned for more. It's a spiritual inspiration that guides our next artist, Boyd Sharp of Osage, Minnesota. He grew up among a family of artists in the late 1930s. In the days of no TV or video games, he let his artistic spirit guide his head, heart, and hand to grow his painting skills. Whether he has moved to paint contemporary or floral art, Southwest landscapes, or stunning portraits, Sharp has the ability to capture the moment and make it memorable.
Well, I was born in St. James, Minnesota. That's where I also was kind of introduced to art. And what I do first, I set them down flat, because they have to be flat. They cannot be turned because the paint will run. First thing in art was my mother would take me into the post office in St. James. And there they had an Art Deco painting up on the wall. It was Indians, and they were spearing fish, and they were well, they were harvesting, and it was that Art Deco type. Now, I didn't know what Art Deco was at that time, but it just fascinated me. Now we got to put a little more color on it. All I did was art, basically, because my grades were so terrible. That was the only thing that got me passed. I didn't care. I used to decorate my school papers with different colors and this and that. It was the only thing that looked nice on the papers. And I like to experiment. I always was experimenting. I did a painting with rollers, and those are all fun things for me. When a painting becomes mechanical, when you've done it enough times, so you kind of want to change, then I change to something else. I'm not one of these painters that you can catalog. I mean, you never know what I'm going to do next, because I never know. I tried to find a brush that would work. But this actually works the best. I just cut a little bit off of all of these Norway pines out here, and then I can kind of come up with what I want to do. But first I'm just going to move it around just a little bit, not much. Then we're going to go outside. When you start out with that painting and you set it down, and you start moving these colors, and then you get a little bit farther down and say, boy, purple would look good here. Or something would look good over here. And it's always evolving. Now I take these outside. It's a little cool today, but it'll be just fine. It's just the excitement, and I don't know what's going on around me at all when I'm painting. There's no radio on, no television, no nothing. And I'll move it around just a little bit. See what we get. See that mess? Now we'll go back inside. You're in your zone. Artists are a funny thing that way. You just get in your zone. You do not want to be bothered or anything else. And, well, the spiritual part of it is when I get done with a painting, I have no idea how I did it. And I always figured I was guided a little bit, especially my religious paintings, because they just seem to come out. I mean, it's there. And to me, to try to explain how it got there, I didn't go to school. I didn't, I have nobody behind me saying you got to do this or you got to do that. It probably would have been nice to have that. Now, New York is one of my markets because of the 911 painting. And when they hit the first tower, then I started watching it, because this was really something. And then they hit the second tower. An announcer said, I hope the people in the United States will think this is just a New York thing, and kind of sweep it under the table. Well, they didn't have to worry about that. It united us like you wouldn't believe. So then I decided that I'm going to paint the 911 painting. I started out with the eagle, and then the flag I already had, and I hung that up in my studio. And then I went over and I got some other magazines, and way down in the corner they had this fireman going like this, as you can see in the picture. Well, I got him in there, and I was trying to figure out what to put on his hat. So I put USA on there because it's for all of us. I was sleeping up in my studio at that time. About 2 o'clock in the morning, I decided to just put the torch in. It just came out the way I wanted to it, and then I thought, well, should I paint the claw of the eagle on there to hold it? And it wouldn't have taken me long. Anyway, I decided, no, we all have to hold that. So that's why it's just hanging in space. Did the whole thing in 6 days. It just went, but this is another one where I don't know how in the world I did those paintings. I mean, the paint you just put the thing in the dip and then boom, and it's there. What I wanted to show was just the towers. I was going to paint the buildings around it and everything else, and I just wanted the blue towers. And I had received a card from one of the fire departments. They had taken the picture that they had on there from the ocean, right at it. So that's basically what I used for the design. And then after I got it all done, I was surprised on how well it worked out. That's one of these divine things again. And I've taken it to several shows, and the people would come and look at it, and they would just look at it. And then they would bring other people back and look at it, and they didn't really say a whole lot. And so I call it silence. And it's kind of my personal memorial to the 9/11 disaster.
Well, that's all we have on Prairie Pulse for this week. And as always, thanks for watching.
Funding for Minnesota Legacy programs are provided by a grant from the Minnesota Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund, with money from the vote of the people of Minnesota on November 4th, 2008, and by the members of Prairie Public.